Everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here to talk to Salil about his book on the Gujaratis. So I'll start with the first question, Salil.
Sure, I just wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, thank you, Aienla. You have been incredibly patient as an editor. I took 8 years to finish this book or something like that, and you told me when to pull out and when to push in, and make sure that there was more into the book or less should be in the book. So you and David and the team I've been very grateful to. And it's very important that, for me personally, that we are speaking today of all the days, because my mother would have turned 90 today. And I'm the way I am because of her. I always blame her for everything. So I'm really glad that we are meeting on the 15th December. Yeah.
Okay. The first question, Salil.
Mic closer.
Let me first find my question. Okay, Gujaratis have dominated Indian society for decades now. From Mahatma Gandhi, J.R.D. Tata, and Vikram Sarabhai, to name just a few soon after independence, to Modi and Mukesh Ambani today, Gujaratis have played a major role in the shaping of the country. Tell us, what is it about the community that comprises less than 5% of the total population that has made it so successful and influential?
It's a great question, and I think that's what this book tries to do, explain it. Partly it tells the good and the bad. No community is good, no community is bad. And each community has the good and the bad within it, and also the ugly in it. And I've tried to be fair about that. I think one reason that accounts for Gujarati success, and all generalizations are difficult, so I don't want to make it like this is some kind of a oracle here. But I think one reason is optimism. They always think that tomorrow will be better than today, and they believe in them, or I should say we believe in ourselves, and we want to lift ourselves by our bootstraps. And so government, if it's in the way, we try to find a way around it. If there is something that requires a compromise, we build it. We are very good at compartmentalizing things. So we can write extremely vicious, bigoted posts on Facebook about another community and a perfectly normal business relationship with people from the same community, and without thinking there's anything contradictory. I have a story of, and there's an actual story about New Zealand councillor. He was a councillor in the local politics there. And he used to garland Gandhi's statue every year. And he was putting very vicious anti-minority posts on Facebook. And he was removed. And he kept showing his pictures with Gandhi, saying that, why am I being removed? He didn't see anything wrong in that. So I think this ability to compartment, de-emotionalize decisions, being very practical, being very result-oriented, all of that probably account, and that also makes us stubborn, because, while we extol Gandhi for his non-violence, he was also an extremely stubborn man.
Asmita is the essence of Gujaratiness. Tell us what it is all about.
Yeah, so Asmita is a very interesting word. It comes from Sanskrit, and if you really go into its origin, then, in terms of popular parlance, the Gujarati writer Kanhaiya Munshi has been credited with it, because he wrote a book called Gujaratni Asmita, which means Gujarat's Asmita. And he saw it as identity, but from identity he said self-awareness. And from self-awareness at some point it becomes pride. And from pride sometimes it becomes arrogance, and that arrogance can lead to bigotry. And what I've tried to do is dissect that trajectory from something that was about self-awareness, which is a good thing, to know who you are and your place in the world, and which is exactly how Narsi Mehta, the great poet, saw it. I have a very long conversation, several long conversations with a remarkable Gujarati poet, Sitanshu Yashas Chandra, who lives in Baroda. And he told me many times about what it means, and he goes into the Sanskrit root about asmi, us, as in me and being, and how that leads us to the awareness of the self. But that quickly becomes something that is abhiman and swabhiman, again in a positive sense, as in pride, when the Gujarati poet Narmad comes in the 19th century, and he writes about it. There's another manifestation at the same time, Govardhan Ram Tripathi, who wrote Saraswati Chandra. And if you look at his writing, he talks about doing something for the society. He creates a community called Kalyan Gram in the 4th part of his epic Saraswati Chandra, which is now available in English, translated by Tridip Suhrud. And if you look at that aspect of Asmita, it is about how to do something good for others. it was one of the inspirations, not the only inspiration, but one of the inspirations for Gandhi to start the ashrams in South Africa. That, a kind of a community. Like, he also looked at kibbutz, he also looked at the work of John Ruskin and many others. So it's not the only inspiration, but that's the one way that he entered that space. And then there are other forms of Asmita which come in. In fact, I was talking to Ghanshyam Shah, a very well-known social scientist, and he said that how many Gujaratis are there in the world? I said, well, about 6 crore. He said, then there are 6 crore Asmitas. And I think there is something to that, to understand that there's no one way of identifying it. Where it has become a problem now is the politicization of the concept. And the politicization essentially means that an attack on an individual or an attack on a political act is an attack on the Gujarati identity. So whether you take Narmada agitation, and when Medha Patkar and everybody tries, trying to make sure that at least the displaced people are treated well, at that time what you hear instead is that this is an attack on Gujarat and Gujarat's Asmita. When after the Godhra massacres and the retaliatory pogroms happened in 2002, after that Narendra Modi, who was the chief minister at that time, had launched something called Gaurav Yatra. Gaurav Yatra meaning the march of pride. And in that, he often, the word Asmita was often used by speakers at that time. So it has become a kind of a weaponized subject about a kind of a pride, a kind of haughtier attitude than what it used to be. And I think the challenge is for us to retrieve it from that, yeah.
Thank you. Gujaratis have been stereotyped as good at making money and being vegetarian. But your book goes beyond that stereotype. What are the key traits of the Gujaratis?
We are like every other people. So we, of course, love making money, but we also love giving away money and losing money. Stock market is full of brokers. Some win, some lose, and the losers are also Gujaratis. We shouldn't forget. And some make it ethically, like Hemendra Kothari, whose story I have, and some make it by bending the rules, like Harshad Mehta or Premchand Roychand in another century. And those stories are also in the book. So you do have that. So there is that, and also the vegetarianism, which everyone assumes that Gujaratis are vegetarian, but the primary vegetarian Gujaratis are the Jains and the upper caste Hindus, which is about 5% of the population. Now, it doesn't mean that the rest of the 95% are big, voracious meat eaters. Some people don't eat it for ethical reasons, some for religious reasons, some because they can't afford it, some because they don't like the taste, and some because they've never been exposed to it. But there is a protein deficiency, which is a very relevant thing in the Gujarati society. If you look at statistics, the official statistics are between 55 and 60% of Gujaratis probably eat meat. And that includes the Dalits, the coastal communities. Gujarat is one of the biggest producers of seafood. It exports a lot, but obviously a lot of it gets eaten, right? It's not that it just disappears out of the blue. So of course Gujaratis eat meat. And the other part is again, the ability to compartmentalize comes in here, that people would eat what they do at home, and then they would go out at night and either eat egg omelets on these carts in Ahmedabad, which are very popular, or they would go to a place called Bhatiyar Gali, where you get meat samosas and chicken this, and there is I'm not giving away, but it's a lovely story, so I have to mention this. But there's also a dish in Gujarat called Jain chicken. Now, it's not mock meat, as people do it in Southeast Asia. A Jain chicken is basically chicken without onion and garlic. So the logic is that you're being partly faithful to, and people do eat it, and then when they come home, and if the mother or the wife or the sister says, "Moh kholo, batao," open your mouth and show me, and they try to smell, and they don't smell onion or garlic, so they think, okay, they have not eaten anything nasty. So, but we are able to live with two universes at the same time. And it exists, because I've had the Jain chicken, and in fact, we have to send it back to say, "Bhai, jara aur tadka laga do," and then he brought it back with garlic, then we could finish the dish.
Salil, you say in your book that there is no one type of Gujarati. Take us back to the origins of the community. Tell us about the various tribes and sects that make up the Gujarati community.
That's a fascinating question, because when I started out, I wanted to look at what were the known cliches about Gujaratis, which was vegetarianism, making money, being enterprising, going abroad to succeed, and traveling basically as if everything was a pull factor and there was no push factor. One thing I learned while reading is that there's a huge push factor, because there were lots of droughts and famines and so on in Saurashtra and Kutch, which is one reason people sat in those boats made in Veraval and went to East Africa and Socotra and Muscat and Aden and so on. So there is that part to it. And once you try to break it down, again, something I did not know before I started writing, but there is a greater variety of the Muslim community in Gujarat than anywhere else in India. And I mean, people think it's only Bohras, Khojas, and Memons, but once you dig into it, you find that there is a lot more. There's, of course, Ismailis, and of course, after that, there are the Maldharis and the Mianas and the Mirpur. I mean, it's a long, long, long list. Some of them have syncretic beliefs. A lot of the habits and family, there's a pattern called Kholo Bharvo, which is, I think, when the pregnant woman is in the 7th month of pregnancy, whether you're Bohra, whether you're a Khoja, or whether you're a Brahmin, or whether you're a Jain, you have similar rituals. So there's a lot of similarity across like that, thal that they eat. Yes, of course, there is an undiu, which I've described rather lyrically, and I hope you'll go and eat undiu after that. But there is also an undiu with mutton, which you get, which the Muslims eat. So by trying to present the community as a monolith, we do ourselves a disservice, and we do social discourse a disservice, because we try to create an identity which is a cutout, a cardboard, but it's certainly not, it's a hologram, it's not an actual reality, yeah.
Somnatha is a very controversial chapter in the history of Gujarat. Somnatha.
Somnath, yes.
Yeah, talk us through it.
Sure, so the history of Gujarat is, when you ask people what happened in Somnath, you will be told that there's a particular king from Ghazni, Muhammad Ghazni, who came 17 times to raid it, and the 17th time he was successful. It has since been raided by Alauddin Khilji. Mughals wanted to raid it, and it has been repeatedly attacked. And Sardar Patel wanted it rebuilt. Kanhaiya Lal Munshi wanted to be rebuilt. The great nostalgia in the Gujarati mind is that before those invasions came, it was a golden age, the Solanki age, Chalukya age, as it was called, roughly from the 12th century to the 14th century, that period. And at that time, you had all these kings, from the 10th to the 12th century. My mistake. Anyway, and at that time, what used to happen was that you had all these Vanraj Chavda and Siddharaj Jai Singh, and there are three great novels that Kanhaiya Lal Munshi wrote, Patanni Prabhuta, Gujarat No Nath, and Raja Dhiraj, which are all available in English, translated by Rita and Abhijit Kothari. Now, if you read those novels, you will get a very golden age nostalgia type of a view of Gujarat. And maybe there is, but a lot of those stories are derived from two sources. One is what are called the Bhats and Charans. These are the people who are the troubadours and the bards. I mean, they go around and singing songs, and they describe a vivid battle as though they were eyewitnesses. And this is how the Somnath story has been passed down through generations. Now, Aleph published a wonderful book in its early years by Romila Thapar, the historian. And she actually tries to not dissect, not challenge, but she tries to read alternate history. Because one thing she finds is that while on one hand, there are lots of stories about the destruction of Somnath and how the Brahmins were treated badly and so on, most of them came from accounts written by the Arabic or Persian writers. There was very little contemporary writing of that time, either from the Jain Bhandars or local writers. Also, there was no retaliatory violence against the mosques which were already on the coast of Saurashtra. So she tried to probe further. And one thing she found is that the Gujarati was a very smart chap at that time in Saurashtra. And he and she could distinguish between those who came on horses to attack and those who had come by sea to trade. And those who had come by sea to trade were made part of the society. And they were not harmed. And those mosques were not, and they always saw that as a, now the confluence of those two identities is one of the problems which has happened because of the monolithic history that we are now seeing in Gujarat now, and which is a problem. So again, the idea of looking at what, and there are other stories, such as there were these so-called gates of Somnath, which one particular British officer wanted to bring back after the fall of Ghazni in Afghanistan. So he wanted to bring them back. And Thomas Macaulay, who has many problems, I mean, he said that, all the wisdom of the East is not worth one library of the Western shelf. He had famously said that, and he created this minute and which created this culture of Babus. But on this issue, he was right. He said, no, don't bring it back because you're going to start creating animosity between Hindus and Muslims. And therefore, don't bring the gate. But the gates were brought back. Now, some people who have actually examined the wood have found that the wood is actually native to the region from where he was coming in Central Asia, and it was not native to Gujarat. So it's quite likely that the gates that have been, so it's a story built on myth upon myth upon myth, but those myths are now taken as reality, and challenging that simply with history and facts is very hard, as we all know from what's happening with misinformation and disinformation on social media.
Gujaratis have spread to every corner of the world. Give us a flavor of the Gujarati diaspora.
Yeah, so there is a very famous Parsi poet. I mean, Parsis are Gujaratis in my book, so I'm very expansionist. You know, if you can speak Gujarati, if you've lived in Gujarat, or if you have been touched by Gujarat and live abroad, I take you in, yeah, in my book, at least. Some people challenge that. So if someone actually did ask me, how can Parsis be Gujarati? I said, you know, Parsi is a faith, Gujarati is a language, so you're making a category mistake here when you're trying to compare the two. So we need to make better. She said, how? I said, do you know that both Manmohan Singh and Nawaz Sharif are both Punjabis? And she had to pause and think about that. So I think it's the same logic here. Or for that matter, you know, Mamta Banerjee and Hasina, they're both Bengalis, right? So it's the same logic here, that we have to think about language as a language and not give it a color of religion, which it does not deserve. So that said, Khawardar wrote this wonderful poem, which was that Jhan jhan vase ek Gujarati, tyan sada kal Gujarat. Wherever there is a Gujarati, it's Gujarat forever. That's what he wrote. And so obviously they are in every part of the world. Now, if I tried to do that, I didn't have the energy or time or budget, nor did Alif. So I had to use my memories of travel that I've made over the years, the countries that I've lived in or spent a long time in. So I have basically written about Gujaratis in Myanmar or Burma, in Singapore and Indonesia, East Africa, South Africa, Belgium, Britain, and the US. Of course, I'm missing out huge chunks of the world, and I'm aware of that. And maybe that's the next book I should write. Hint, yeah. Anyway, but no, that said, so what you find is that, again, the assumption is that the Gujarati has gone abroad to either set up a shop in East Africa, or to become a money lender and money trader like a Shroff in Hong Kong and Singapore and so on, or to set up a business. You don't find Gujarati CEOs in the US of large companies like Intel or Twitter or Facebook or you know, Microsoft has Satya Nadella, but not a Gujarati, right? So when you look, or Sundar Pichai, again, not a Gujarati, he runs Google. So when you look at that, but then why are they so good at business? They are good at their own businesses because they want to own it and they become the CEOs. So if you look at motel chains in America, there are 55,000 motels in the US, about 40 to 50% of them are run by Gujaratis. And most of them happen to be Patels. So in fact, the Americans sometimes thought that Patel was the Gujarati term for motel. And some people joke about it and call it Potel. And there's one guy who is Patel and he changed his surname to Amin. So I said, why? He said, if in a city everybody is named Smith, don't you want to be called Mr. Brown? So I said, yeah. Yeah. And if you look at the American Hotel Owners Association, I'm not making this up, but like 17 or 18 of the 30 board members were named Patel, and none of them was related to the other. So that's quite a remarkable thing. So they've gone out for that, and again there is a caste composition, because upper castes or dominant castes or powerful castes were prevented from crossing the black waters. But those who were not lower down in the pecking order had no such restriction. And they belonged to the Swaminarayan movement. And Swaminarayan movement believed in, like Freemasons, you know, to create a trading association, go abroad, set up shop, and become business people. And they started doing that, and they started doing it very well. And therefore, you have proliferation of these institutions which are Gujarati owned and run. But, and this is where it gets interesting, that you would think that, okay, so they go abroad to make money. Yes, but I've also been remarkably pleased to see stories about Gujaratis. Nelson Mandela spent 28 years in jail, and he was with 6 other people. One of them was Ahmad Kathrada, who was Gujarati, right? And he was also in the same Rivonia trial. He was known as Kathi, and I'd spoken to him on the phone. We were to meet, but before my trip, he had passed away. But I spoke to his family later. So that's Ahmad Kathrada. Then you have people like the Mehta family in Singapore. In Myanmar, sorry, who basically gave the money that Subhash Chandra Bose wanted to form the Indian National Army. So again, giving money for national liberation. Now, and this, although at the same time they would call themselves Gandhians, but they felt that Bose was worth supporting. And because the father was Pranjivan Mehta, who was with Gandhi on the ship that sailed back in 1909, which made Gandhi, and the conversation led Gandhi to write Hind Swaraj. So again, the person who was instrumental was that. Actually, his family was donating money later to Subhash Chandra Bose. So that fascinating coexistence is there. The taxi drivers union in New York is run by a Gujarati woman, Bhairavi Desai, who for a long time did not have a driving license, and she was an immigrant. And the first non-white trade union in the UK was a short 4 feet 9 inches or 5 feet 1 inch woman called Jayaben Desai, who took on Grunwick, which was a photo studio, and the strike lasted for 2 years. This was just before Margaret Thatcher came to power. And Pragna Patel, again, she set up something called Southall Black Sisters, which has done amazing work in Britain for women who face violence. Sakhi, another organization in New York, which works on domestic violence, its executive director for about 10 years was my cousin, Prema Vora. So, and other, I mean, it was one of the founders was, again, there was a Gujarati involved there. So there are lots of things where, you know, in the apartheid, as I said, there were many who went to jail for the cause, they were Gujaratis. And so, and Kenneth Kaunda, you know, when he wanted the constitution written in Zambia, the lawyer who helped him was a Gujarati. So again, there is a tremendous role that Gujaratis have played abroad in some very worthy causes, which those are the stories not yet known, and I hope those will be of interest when you read them, yeah.
Okay, the Mahatma is the most famous Indian and Gujarati of the modern era. Tell us how Gujarat influenced or shaped him as a person, his philosophy and his politics.
Very great, good question, because Gandhi was deeply Gujarati, but he was also very international. He was influenced by almost every religion. He was influenced by Ruskin, by Tolstoy, and in South Africa, the years of his apprenticeship. You know, Fatima Meer is a very well-known was a very well-known South African filmmaker. And she told me what many South Africans have told Indians, that you gave us Barrister Gandhi, we gave you Mahatma. And I think there is something to it, because when Gandhi went there, he was there to settle an arbitration dispute between the Dada Abdullah family, a Memon family. And he was there to, and then he gets treated badly, and he sees how badly Indians are treated, and therefore he reads all these works. And among his influences, which are purely Gujarati, one is his mother, Putli Bai, who gave him the values about being a vegetarian and, you know, respecting all forms of life. We cannot. Kasturba was a huge influence in life. Again, Gujarati woman. They married very early. They were 9 or 10 when they were married. She was 6 months older than him. And later on, I mean, Govardhan Ram Tripathi's fiction, the Saraswati Chandra, the 4-volume novel, that profoundly influenced him. He had correspondence with Srimad Rajchandra, who was a Jain holy man, for want of a better word, with whom he had a correspondence, and that also influenced him. So a lot of Gujarati ideas influenced, and he also wanted to challenge Gujaratis to move beyond the straitjacket. So the only time he stood for an election and won was for the Gujarati Sahitya Parishad, the literary academy. And when he was made, everybody said, "Ato Baharna Manas che, he's an outsider. Why is he not he's not really a writer." By then his autobiography had been published though. So he said that, yes, whether I'm outsider or not, at least I'm a reader. And I can tell you that all that you write, and this was the time when Gujarati writing was going through Pandit Yug, the scholarly period. He said, let me ask you one thing. What will you write that will impress Koshya? And Koshya is the farm laborer. He said, if you can't make yourself accessible to him, everything you write is meaningless. And when he said that, that made writers like Pannalal Patel, Dhumketu, Jhaverchand Meghani, and all these writers to start looking for stories. And Darshak, Manubhai Pancholi, and they started writing about rural Gujarat. And bits lost now. Now most of the stuff that comes out is a very much middle class, urban, and so on. But those stories are getting lost.
Okay, one of the most powerful chapters in the book for me is the chapter entitled "Vegetarians Who Roast Humans."
Yeah.
Gujarat has been the site of one of some of the most violent riots in independent India. I wanted to ask you, what is it that accounts for this vicious streak in the community?
I think we have to go, I mean, I don't want to say there's one answer to everything, but it's that compartmentalization. It's the assumption that we are non-violent and we don't do it, and things simply happen, and when they happen, you don't talk about it. And I'm not only talking about 2002. 2002 is not an aberration. I mean, in a way, you could argue that it's part of a pattern, and it goes back to 1890s, when the first riots have started. Then there was one in 1920s during the partition. Then the worst violence India had known before 2002 was in 1969, the year of Gandhi's centenary, when Ahmedabad erupted for a completely silly reason that, Hindus wanted to take a particular procession through a Muslim area, and while they went through, someone's cart got upset and a copy of Holy Quran fell down, and all that led to all kinds of skirmishes. Sadhus came with sticks to beat people up, and that led to a lot of violence. And Ahmedabad would have had its first cricket test match then in 1969, but it was moved to Bombay instead against New Zealand, Graham Dowling's team. And otherwise, the idea was to move it from Bombay, Calcutta, Delhi, Madras, and move to other cities, but it missed that chance. So 69 was one period. Then you move fast forward by 10 years, and again in the 80s, you have inter-caste riots of pretty gruesome way because reservations were being extended by Madhav Singh Solanki to the intermediate castes, and which quickly turned communal. And it was presaged by what happened in Baroda in 1982, which was the first riot I ever reported as a young reporter. So you have that in 82 and 83, and then it escalates. Then 1992, the trail of destruction when the Rath Yatra begins from Somnath, again, historically important place where Advani decided to start from his DCM Toyota truck. And then after that, you have 2002, and after that, there have been skirmishes and periods of violence. So it's not that there has been. In fact, a very interesting point, in 1986, I was a student in the US. I'd come back to India, and Veer Sanghvi, who was the editor of Imprint magazine, asked me to go to Gujarat and say that, why does it keep burning? Find out. So I said, okay. And so I went, and for about 25 days, traveled all over the state. And one of the most memorable things I heard at that time was from Madhav Singh Solanki, who was no longer the chief minister. He had been removed because of the violence in the state, although he had won a huge majority. And he said, આપણે તો હંમેશા હિંસક હતા, આપણને શાંત કરવા માટે ગાંધીજીની જરૂર પડી. Which basically means that we were always violent. To calm us down, we needed Gandhi. And I think there's something to that we need to figure out, that maybe that streak was always there, but we are able to separate ourselves from that tendency. And as Ganesh Devi, the amazing scholar, who gave one short interview, which was about 800 or 500 words, and 50 or 60 articles were written against him after that. He was a professor at the MS University. He told me that there can't be nicer people than you can imagine than Gujaratis. Any of you who travels by train in India, in the old days, not this Vande Bharat airplane type seats, but when you can sit across each other and chat and all that, if you were sitting there and talking, and if there was a Gujarati around, they will immediately, after the first few stations, bring out their khakras and chundos and theplas and start sharing it with you without a moment. There's a beautiful story about V. Gangadhar, who was a well-known Bombay journalist who died recently. And he was diabetic, and he was at an airport in New York with his wife, and the flight was delayed, and he was hungry, and she also said, "Okay, what can I do?" And suddenly a woman comes with some muthias, which is a Gujarati savory. He said, "We also have diabetes in our family," and she gives it to them. And so this kind of small acts of generosity are genuine, absolutely genuine, no question about it. But what also happens is that once that generosity is extended, then others have to follow the norm, and then that becomes the norm, and other alternatives are not allowed. So yes, you'll get to eat the khakras, but then they will say, yeah, but we can't have tenants in the building who are going to cook meat. And even Zomato can't deliver there if they're going to do delivery. So you're in Valkeshwar, you won't get chicken biryani. You'll have to go somewhere else to eat. And restaurants will start calling them pure veg and all that. So it's this weird manifestation of, so Ganesh Devi was actually talking about exactly that we are incredibly nice and generous, and then suddenly this inexplicable bigotry emerges from that. Now, I'm not saying the answers are here, but I've tried to explore why how we are able to live with our hypocrisies.
Salil, do you want to read a passage from the book, your favorite passage from the book, can we, or?
It's hard to, from 700 pages to.
Okay.
But
so,
I think I either read the prologue or something at the end of Asmita, one of the two.
Okay, then maybe I'll just ask you my last question.
Okay.
And after that, perhaps you could read something from the prologue, and then we can throw open
the
floor for questions. I think I'll just combine two questions in one.
Yeah.
One is, the Gujarati food goes beyond dhokla. So give us a flavor of the Gujarati cuisine. And also the fact that Gujaratis are really good at making money. And there was a newspaper report which called them, the best business people in the world. So can you just answer those two questions for the audience?
Yeah, so food, I mean, so there are, of course, wonderful Gujarati dishes, Yeah, but I had a very different kind of khichdi here today, but Gujarati khichdi is very different, of course. But undiyu and the savories of all kind. In Saurashtra, you'll have something called save tomato shak, which is like arrabbiata sauce with save and with tomato, and with a bit of potato thrown in. It's really, really nice. I would urge you to have that. And when you have the proper Gujarati thali at a place like Vishala in Ahmedabad or MJ's, places like that, you will really find richness that goes beyond. But I'm still talking only about the vegetarian one. If you have a Bora thal, you'll get amazing Muslim dishes. And if you go to a Parsi meal, a friend of mine is Parsi. Her son is getting married on 24th December, and I can't wait for the dansak and prawn dal, dhandal patia and all of that I will be eating on Christmas Eve in Bombay. So you have that. I mean, there is that richness. But we also have an incredible ability, and probably we are better than Punjabis at murdering other cuisines. Yeah? In fact, to the extent that we will put tomato ketchup on anything, Amul cheese on anything, ghee on anything, and I mean, there are bhajiyas fried in Fanta and Coca-Cola that you might get in Baroda. There are dosas with Chinese and Mexican. There's a Mexican bale, which is basically nachos and all that, but with hot. There is a pizza called Jasu Benno pizza, which is very popular in Gujarat, which is basically a debra or thepla, or bhakri, as we might call it. And on that, it is Maggie's tomato ketchup, a few vegetables thrown in here, and so on. And we insist on having that sort of food wherever we go, and we are absolutely fine with it. And there's a Cow Gully in Bombay is one place, and Law Gardens in Ahmedabad. You'll get the kind of menu. I mean, I've seen a sandwich with, and I'm not making this up, chutney, chocolate, corn, ice cream, and tomato ketchup in one sandwich. Now, of course, it's an explosion of flavors. Whether those are good is a different matter. So yeah, that's what, oh yes, oh gosh, the ice cream flavors. I mean, there are all kinds of flavors you can imagine. Of course, there's a pan-flavored ice cream, right? There's a tamaku-flavored ice cream. Someone started a whiskey-flavored ice cream, which failed, because probably it was not genuine whiskey because it was being served in Gujarat, but also probably the Gujarati who knows his whiskey doesn't want to dilute it with milk. So that might be the other reason. But that's a guess on my part. I don't know about that, yeah. But so, yeah, you have that. I mean, so that's the food part. And about being the smartest people in making money, incredibly wealthy and popular. But, I mean, you could argue and say that so are Sindhis, so are Marwadis. The Economist magazine called them the world's finest, and Marco Polo has praised as the world's finest and honest trade people. But we should take it with a pinch of salt, because a lot of corporate scandals we usually see a Gujarati hand in it, or mastermind in it. You know what I mean? And not just Harshad. Nirav Modi is a Gujarati, right? I mean, so we shouldn't forget those stories about also when we recount all the positives. So there is that, but and the Lebanese from West Africa, and there are lots of communities. So there's an American academic called Joel Kotkin who has studied 5 communities, and he does, of course, include the Jews in that. But he says that one community which was able to outsmart the Jewish community in a trade in which it had no expertise was diamonds, and that was Palanpuri Jains. And they did it by just simple arbitrage, that diamonds are made in South Africa, they're traded in Amsterdam and Antwerp, but let us polish them in Palanpur and Surat, and then sell them back and create a middle-class market of the mid-quality diamonds, and for the American, and De Beers loved it. And that wonderful magic lasted for 50, 60 years. It's probably going to end now with the artificial diamonds. And the smart diamond merchants know that, and they're ensuring that their kids don't end up following the same business.
Let's read something from the prologue.
Okay. So I think what I'll do is, it's 2 pages, but it's a prologue, and that pretty much gives the flavor of the book. And then if there is time, there is a short passage. Yeah. Aao mari sathe. Aao beso. Shu lesho. Thandu, garam, nasto, pani. Come with me. Welcome. Do sit down. What will you have? Something hot or cold? Some tea, snacks, water? So you want to know about us, the Gujaratis. You want to know who we are, what has made us the way we are, and you wonder why we act the way we do. You know quite a bit about us already, and you probably have strong opinions about us, that we are vegetarian and we are supposed to be clever at making money. We are practical and pragmatic. We murder the finest cuisines in the world by adding sugar and Amul cheese to everything, transforming Punjabi, Chinese, and Italian food into concoctions that the Punjabis, Chinese, and Italians would never recognize. When we travel, we expect to eat dokla and gathia in Amritsar, Shanghai, or Rome. We generously share our snacks, which we pronounce as snakes. And we have food taboos that exasperate our hosts. No onion or garlic on Fridays. Puri is only made of amaranth flour during the monsoon month of Shravan. Many of us piously say we are vegetarian, and then late evening, when our family is glued to Arnab Goswami on television, we tiptoe out and visit the hawker's cart down the alley to eat omelets. And we break into Garba at the slightest pretext. Garba has near religious significance. What goes around comes around does not always mean karma. For us, it means Garba. You may not know our poets and writers because you think that the only books we care about are the ledger. We are obsessed with success, which we can feel we measure objectively only through money. Paiso bole che. We know that money talks. Even at funerals, you might find some men discussing stock market prices while looking suitably gloomy, randomly folding their hands and doing namaste when someone passes by. We can walk into a restaurant, brazenly ask for 1 cup of tea with 3 saucers, which the friends accompanies us will share. We buy a newspaper for 4 rupees, and 8 of us will pass around to read it. Some of us are known to haggle with a hapless call center employee for an hour to get 20 rupees refunded. You smirk at our meticulous planning, but enters the logistics of organizing events to us. You find it hilarious that we wave the tricolor vigorously, but rarely join the army. Actually, some of us do. If you call us cowards, we point out at the man whose photograph is on every currency note of India, except the old 1 rupee note, Mohandas Gandhi, and claim we are non-violent. And yet, with all such unjustified insults, we will see that there is more than enough valor among Gujaratis. As for non-violence, there is another story altogether, as we periodically erupt into gruesome violence, massacring hundreds of our own. In India alone, there are 55 million of us who consider Gujarati to be their mother tongue, about 4.5% of the population, and possibly there are 6 million more abroad, on every continent, if not in every country. 1 out of every 3 Indians abroad is supposed to be a Gujarati. In a video that has gone viral on the internet among Gujaratis, the popular raconteur, Sairam Dave, recounts dozens of names of prominent Gujaratis who have done the community proud, to the vigorous applause of the audience. But there are exceptions. Not all of us are vegetarians. Indeed, one of the most comprehensive surveys of Gujaratis ever undertaken shows increased meat eating among Gujaratis. Only 76 of the nearly 300 Gujarati communities surveyed by the Anthropological Survey of India in the 1980s said they only ate vegetarian food. But some 130 communities, or nearly half, said they ate meat occasionally, far higher than the national average of 37%. Not all of us are good at making money either, and the long list of corporate scandals shows not all Gujarati business people are necessarily ethical. Nor are all of us Gandhian ascetics. Many of us love our gold and diamonds. The fancy jewelry shops at Zaveri Bazaar and Opera House in Mumbai have Gujarati owners, Gujarati staff, and Gujarati patrons. We have run motels in America, fought apartheid in South Africa, been expelled from Uganda, formed trade unions in London, sold opium to China, financed Subhash Chandra Bose's Indian National Army. We dominate the list of India's wealthiest, and yet it is our poorest who break the ships and clean the drains in Mumbai, breaking the ships in Alang. Hospitable yet calculating, mercantile and pragmatic, pious and yet tolerating violence, worldly wise while claiming to be spiritual, cheerful and transactional. We see nothing wrong with our contradictions. In the 1970s and 80s, Adi Marzban, the famous Parsi director, who also edited his family newspaper Jame Jamshed, hosted an extremely popular television show in Gujarati in Bombay. It had humorous gags, magic tricks, musical performances, skits, jokes, and homilies that never failed to entertain. Aao Mari Sathe, it was called. Come with me. And so I tell you, come with me as I explore the complexities of my people, how we earn, how we politic, how we create, how we pray, how we eat, how we play, how we love, how we kill. There is one, several hands, so. Yeah. Are you? Is someone? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, sir, for the wonderful session. If we talk about Gujarat, there is like Uttar Gujarat, Saurashtra, Dakshin Gujarat, right? So apart from the food and the dialect, what are the other differences which you like looked at in your book as well, like in terms of Gujaratis?
It becomes hard to generalize and with 2 minutes left, so I'll be quick, but I've tried to do that. It is true that in the North Gujarat, you might find a lot more commitment to the land and farming. When you go to the belt along along Gujarat's spine, that is where you will find a lot of what I would call the Bhil and Adivasi communities, which have a very different relationship with religion. Saurashtra is known to be very hospitable and very forward-looking and outward-going and relatively less communalized. And Kutch has always had a very strange relationship because Kutch is also, a lot of people have tended to see themselves as friends and allies across the border. There's a very good Pakistani film, which I'm sure is available somewhere on the internet, called Ramchand Pakistani, and I would urge you to see that.
Keeping in mind there are a lot of common surnames between Gujaratis and Parsis.
Yeah.
The Gujarati language, did it exist before the arrival of the Parsis from, in the western coasts of India from Persia?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean,
and one more thing.
Yeah.
After the Parsis arrived, did the Patils of Maharashtra, Marathis, become Patels of Gujaratis?
No, the second part I can tell you is not the case because the Parsis who came to Maharashtra, largely most of them were in Bombay. And Bombay was a very Gujarati city. We didn't get the chance to talk about it. But Bombay is in many ways made by Gujaratis. And so what I'm saying is that the Parsis who are in Bombay adopted and continued to remain Gujaratis. So they are Maharashtrians as state residents, but they're Gujaratis. I mean, the school where I went to, which was a Gujarati medium school, my principal used to say, we are Maharashtrians who speak Gujarati. And I think that's a fair way of describing the identity. Yes. So Gujarati comes from Upper Bransha. Upper Bransha became Gurjari. So when you're talking about that Siddharaj Jaisingh's period, a form of Gujarati was spoken, which is probably hard to understand now, which would be also the case with very ancient forms of Hindi and Urdu, because the Parsis come only about 1200 years ago. So you did have those languages, language as it exists. But the difference was, and the Parsis adopted Gujarati. They decided to take it up because it's one of that famous story about the jug of milk being given and then, them saying that we will become part of your system. And it's a slightly disputed story, but it's in the book again. That's what has happened. So Parsis adopted Gujarati custom. One of the promises they made to the king of Sanjan was that they will adopt, the women will start wearing saris and speak Gujarati. So I don't know the etymology. Patil is also in Karnataka, right? So, I mean, it's more like a title. And it's a title given for the tasks they perform for the state. Whereas Patel, there are 5 types. Again, I don't want to go into huge detail now. There are Kanbis and Leuas who are one kind, but then there are Kadwa and others, which are of the other kind. And also, there are Patels who are so-called OBCs and Patels who are higher than them, yeah.